Now we need to remove the screws that hold the shield on top of the motherboard, and also 4 screws that actually act to hold the heatsink and the fan to the underside of the motherboard where the processors live. So actually, before we forget, let's first remove our hard drive, which is on the left side. You'll see a plastic panel. Pry up the edge of the plastic panel, remove the cover, and then there's one blue screw here holding the hard drive in. Be careful not to strip the head of this screw. That one came off pretty easily. Sometimes they're really on there tight. Don't lose that screw. And we grab the little handle here on the hard drive. Pull that up. What we're going to do is we're going to slide the hard drive toward the front of the machine first, and then pull it out. Slides right out. And the hard drive is in a little metal cage or a basket, and if you ever need to replace your hard drive, it's easy enough just to remove that hard drive, put another one in, and the PS3 will reformat the new hard drive for you. So now let's remove these screws. 5 of the screws are like the wide threaded screws that hold the reset and eject buttons in place. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's remove those real quick. 3, 4, 5. Set those to the side with their cousins. Now we've got a longer wide threaded screw here at the back left corner next to the power port. It's a little longer. Put that by itself. Now there are 2 screws. They're smaller than all the others. You may want to just mark with a felt tip pen or a Sharpie. This one here and this one here are smaller than all the others. We'll use a small 00 size Phillips head screwdriver to remove this guy and this guy. And finally, let's loosen the 4 screws that hold these springs in place that are pulling the heatsink and the fan against the underside of the motherboard. Pull that out, 2 screws. Pull this out with its 2 screws. Set that aside. And now we can lift the machine up and we can pull all the motherboard attachments out in one big piece, and we're left with guts of the machine and in this case, an extremely dusty bottom half of the case. Again, feel free at any point to get out your canned air or air compressor and blast away. Now we're ready to do the final bit of disassembly. What we'll do first is lift up the back of the machine, and we're going to pull off this plastic backing here that just kind of covers the fan exhaust and holds on to the power port. We have a couple of little plastic tabs here need to be pried up, 2 in the front and 1, 2, 3 on the back, and the plastic back cover comes off. We set that aside. Now we can flip the unit. Let's see, first we'll start off, we'll take off this top shield. So we lift up the metal shield and we carefully pull the Blu-ray drive data cable through the hole. There we go. So we don't want to rip it out, or we don't actually need to remove that. So I was thinking, the fewer of these clips that you open and close, the better. Sometimes they'll snap off and then you have big problems they didn't need to have. So here's the top of our motherboard, but we're interested in the bottom half, bottom side. So we flip the unit over. So try that again. We're going to flip it over this way so that we're looking at the underside. This is your fan and your heatsink combined. There's a power cable here for the fan that we're going to detach from the motherboard. We're just going to pull that carefully, and I'm going to go ahead and completely take this one apart. You've got your battery over here, holds on to the the time, and we're going to unplug that carefully from the motherboard. Okay. Now we'll just pull. You notice how easily the fan and heatsink assembly comes off the motherboard. Now, this cooling paste that's put on at the factory, if that was still fresh, it'd be a lot more difficult to pull that apart. There'd be almost a suction, like when you get your boot stuck in the mud, it's hard to pull it out. But when that thermal paste dries up, it's bone dry here. When that dries up, that thermal paste is not doing its job. Now, this machine had not overheated yet, and they do not have the YLOD of death yet, but they would have very soon, because there's just no cooling capacity left in this thermal paste. Now, to make it easier on us, I'm also going to set the, we'll get back to this in a second, we're going to set the heat sink and the fan assembly aside for a moment. Take off the bottom shield. And what we'll do is we're going to try and pop that shield away carefully from the motherboard. There we go. Now I've got two final tiny screws here to remove. The underside of the hard drive housing. Almost forgot these two little screws. Okay. Now this whole shield will come off. And it's pretty dusty. We'll put the air compressor to that off camera and clean that up a little bit. We'll set that aside. And here is our motherboard. Let's clean that off just for a second. Some of the dust off. And we've completely disassembled the PlayStation 3.